So let's get to the nitty-gritty part of the whole process of the thing. Right, if you remember in my video, I talked about that there was a determination that there was three things. Perfect storm, combination of things that were why my body decided to say, hey, we are just gonna rebel now. Biggest component of the three, relationships with family. Yes, I have been dealing with a toxic relationship with a family member all my life, all 39 years, but up until maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, when they had a health event, major health event, brought them even more into my life. I became a part-time caregiver, so to speak. That's how I look at it. And over the course of time and seeing and being with that person a lot, I started to see more and more the signs, the red flags of them being a narcissist. And so if you're familiar with that term, oh man, yeah. So anyway, setting up those boundaries and learning how to cope with that has been a challenge. It's been an ongoing thing. As if being a caregiver, part-time caregiver, is not stressful enough, then you add in that component of that person being narcissistic and having those traits and tendencies and all those things that come with it, and having other issues within all of that being very stressful. Things I've never had to deal with before, things that I didn't think I'd have to deal with. All of that stress was just piling and piling and piling up on it. And that's something that I'm working on. That's something that a lot of people struggle with, is managing stress. But then you add in all of those other components. And so that was a major thing that when I say that I'm working through all of this, that's what I'm still doing. I'm still working through it on my end, right? I mean, I can't go back on my word in terms of helping that family member out because they are in need. But I'm just figuring out how to balance it and how to even call in reinforcements when I need, and setting those firm boundaries and being okay with it. I know in the beginning it was really, really hard for me because then I'd feel guilty. But if I know in my heart that I'm doing my best and I am putting forth effort to make sure that their basic needs are met, then everything else can just wait. There's been some exercises that I still haven't worked on that can potentially help me in this learning process, or learning process, I guess you could call it. One thing that I am still needing to do is to sit down and to, as if I was writing a letter to that person and telling them how I felt growing up, how I feel now, and how those memories are being triggered, and how I feel, and how just expressing myself unfiltered. And of course, I'm not going to be giving this letter to that person, but the fact that I'm getting it out of me, putting it on paper, reading out loud, and then destroying that piece of paper can be very therapeutic. And so that's something that I'm working towards doing. The person that made the suggestion did say that I have to kind of set the tone, set the mood to do it, to be able to just get it out, get it done, get it over with. So I'm still waiting for that moment. I know I need to create the moment, and so that's coming soon. Something else within that homework, if you will, was also writing myself a letter. Writing myself a letter and expressing to myself why I could be a lovable person, why people like me, and helping myself to reframe my thinking, because being trapped in that relationship with a narcissistic person can take its toll on your view of yourself, right? And so that was a big thing. That's kind of me going into detail without going into too much detail, right? The other two factors being, I still feel having a play in it, but not as big as this, because this had been the biggest emotional roller coaster ever. And so that's been about, in my opinion, 90% of the whole issue. But the other two things were really interesting. One of them was that I was exposed to some sort of fungus, and so I just have to take care of myself in that way. And the other one being a reaction to something that a lot of us got, if you get what I'm saying. A lot of us got recently in the last couple years. So there was a few things that I was doing to help myself to get over that and to process that a little bit more. So that was the perfect storm. Those three things that boom out of nowhere. Another thing that I've learned over the course of the last few years, when someone goes through a traumatic event and they go and they are forced to, maybe they don't want to talk about things and they're forced to talk about it, that sometimes they can have a reaction with that too, in terms of their body and their mind aren't aware. Like they're reliving this traumatic event by talking about it, and their body doesn't know the difference between it being a memory or reoccurring again. And so with some people it can be detrimental to their progress if they're having to relive the traumatic event over and over again, and so their body starts reacting in a certain way. I knew someone that was going to some sort of counseling, and when she started opening that can of worms, she started to have seizures, and the doctors were scanning and doing all the things and they couldn't figure out why, but really emotionally her body was reacting to that trauma as if it was happening all over again, shutting down, protecting itself, really, right? So definitely sometimes we have to be mindful and we have to be careful when we're opening those can of worms. For me, when this all started, that was a thing too. I was helping out somebody that was getting some specialized training, and it potentially was not a good situation that I put myself in, because they did not help me then to cope with the things that were coming up. Those emotions came up and they didn't have anywhere to go. So they were stuck. And so what's so interesting that I've learned over the course of years too, is that when we feel something physical, a lot of times it's emotionally rooted. And so that's a very telling when it comes to the places on my body where that rash or those hives were predominantly popping up, was here. They weren't on my legs, they weren't on my feet, they weren't on my chest, they were here. And so emotionally, when you really dig into and you look at it, it was really my body saying, hey, we know there's things you want to express and you've been holding back, and this is it. That was its way of trying to get those things out. So my friend, we really, I mean, I can't tell you what to do, but for me, I am still working through those emotional things, and I mean it when I say it, that they really do take shape in things we deal with. So I've heard about sometimes when some people get massages and things, that they get really emotional. I've been getting massages for a long time, and nothing like that had ever happened to me up until this weekend. I've never had a massage where I'm actually on my back the whole time. This particular massage therapist massaged here in this area, really deep in that area. And I started to cry. I started to cry and I started to let it out while I was kind of talking with her. And after, I felt such a release. And it wasn't even like it was like welling up. It was just like she started to, and as we were conversing, the tears were just flowing, and I was never like full on sobbing, like I couldn't catch my breath or anything like that, but I just felt the tears coming, and it was the weirdest thing. And so of course it made me curious, and I wanted to look in one of the emotions book where it talks about, because that's something that a lot of people don't know, that a lot of times our emotions get stored in different parts of our body, different organs and things. And so when I looked in this book, it talked about parts of shoulders, chest area, things like that. And so for the chest area, I talked about grief, sadness, yearning, need to get something off chest. So that's definitely been the case with a lot of things. Shoulders, shouldering yourself. And of course, in that area where she was rubbing, potentially it talked about taking care of other people's needs. And so that definitely hit the nail on the head, wouldn't you think? This whole journey and this whole thing that I decided to do, partly therapeutic, partly I hope helpful to someone else to hear my experience, to hear that they're not alone, that they're going through potentially the same thing, or they're dealing with the same thing. I know I've gotten a few messages initially when the trailers were coming out where people were expressing that they or someone they know had been dealing with a lot of similar issues when it came to some sort of rash on their body. And so I feel thankful that now that I know what's going on with me and how to deal with it, that I'm able to then help other people. Some other things that have come up during the biomagnetic therapy have been where I need to work closely a little bit more with my lymphatic system, with my digestive system, and my respiratory system. And so again, that's some other things that I'm still working towards and working on. And of course, this experience really, when I think about it, isn't in vain. It was a pain to go through, but it really fueled my passion even more to want to get trained and become a vitalist through the biomagnetic therapy training. I've seen how it has helped me with the muscle testing and things, and being able to learn the different questions and things and what I need to do to be able to help other people that are in situations like mine, or even uniquely to them. So if you have enjoyed this series, please consider donating to my GoFundMe page that I have listed. Contact me and let me know, and I can send you the link. Any donation would be much appreciated. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next video.